So how many of you were here in LIFT06? 07? Obviously this year. I'm not going to ask who's going to be here next year because, of course, you're all going to be here next year. One of the things that's really interesting to me about this year's event is the changes that have occurred. We're no longer at the university. This is no longer a bunch of college students who are here on their cheap passes for the day to get out of classes. There's a lot of professionals here. There's a much broader array of companies. There's a much broader array of specializations. This isn't just kids anymore. And I think the same can be said about the people who have put this together. I myself have been watching this since long before it existed. And it's been very funny to watch a bunch of kids get together and turn it into this. One thing I'd like to do is I'd like everyone to give a round of applause to everyone who put this event on. And I request that you go up and thank each of them gratefully later, that you hang around for the dinner, that you talk with them and tell them what they got right. Because that's the other thing about this event that's so interesting to me. Coming from the States, coming from Silicon Valley, you can trust that I go to my share of events. And I just happened to make it to one last week, and I think I made it like 3 hours through the event. I was just so tired. And this one is very different to me. There's a lot of energy here. Granted, many of you are staring at your computer screens most of the time, but I know that's because you were, doing all that background research. You were looking up the people they were talking about. You were referencing, and my students do this too, so I'm very used to that. And I know you were doing it respectfully. That's good, though. You were willing to sit here, and when you slow down a little bit, your brain got a little fried. You looked for something else, but you wanted to hear the rest of the ideas. You wanted to hear what people were talking about. Maybe this talk right now wasn't as relevant, but in an hour or two, okay, that one was really relevant. That one looks interesting. And that's one thing I really want to commend these guys on. The array of topics here is a strength because there's enough people here with enough ideas that during the lunches, during the coffee breaks, everyone had someone to talk to. Everyone wanted to talk to a speaker. So this 2-hour event wasn't something up my alley, but the next one will be. And that's really fun. Because when you just go to one event with venture capitalists all the time, or you just hear about the new marketing campaign this year, if it doesn't suit my interest, I have to wonder why I'm there. And I'm actually very happy that I was here. And I have to admit, I didn't fall asleep, thank you, the whole time, even though I'm a bit jet-lagged from it. And I noticed very few, to almost nobody, nodding off. I want to commend you on that one, actually, for paying attention. I mean, as sitting up here as speakers, it's very hard, even with you staring at computer screens, to know that people are paying attention. The biggest one is you're not nodding off. What else changed this year? Because change to me is a really interesting thing. The talks were about something much bigger than they've been before. They were about complex problems. They were about complex issues. They were about the complexity that we're all facing. And by and large, they were all very optimistic talks. They were all about what we can do to address it, how we can learn to go observe people, how we can learn to think about problems differently, how we can, I still love Paul's talk this morning just about the whole game stuff, and I have to admit, as an ignorant American, all I heard was Monty Python. I mean, wonderful delivery, and for some reason the accent worked for me too, but it was entertaining and it was very enlightening. And as little as I know about the gaming industry, hearing so much about it in a way that I could really understand made me not want to work in the gaming industry, but it gave me much greater respect for what they do. And I think that's true of everything I heard in this event. Much more complexity being dealt with in really good ways. And I hope that's true for everyone who sat here as well. I hope that you heard this as a call to arms and saying, well, the world is complex and it's getting much more complex. Technology, social, there's new generations coming up. And you said, okay, great, here are some people that can empower me. This is where I'm going to come to hear the ideas that I can maybe go trigger. And I may not be able to bring anything back to the office, but I can definitely bring some cards back. I can definitely bring some names back. And I definitely am looking forward to next year's event because I'm going to come back and enjoy myself. And what I really enjoy, too, is coming here and seeing so many Europeans. I had the chance to live in Switzerland for about a year and greatly enjoyed the interactions we had here. And it's really nice to come over to this kind of event and see it where it's your event. It's on your turf. It's not people coming over as foreigners coming to America. I'm the foreigner, and I'm very happy about it because just the conversation, the dialogue was so different, and the viewpoint was so different, and that to me, is very rich. And I hope that the event organizers and you guys continue to come to this and invite more people with all this richness, because that's going to help us get through the complexity. That's going to help us understand what the future is really about. So I just want to make a last comment, which is, if you want to understand what the future is going to be, the kind of problem a future is, it's a horrible phrase I'm stealing from Jane Jacobs. If you recognize her, she's an American writer who died last year. And she wrote a book back in the day on how cities were changing. Amazing book, and everyone forgets the last chapter, because it's not actually about the city that she was living in, which was Greenwich, New York, in New York City. The chapter is called The Kind of Problem a City Is. And Jane, in her enlightenedness back in the 60s, wrote about a complex problem, the city. And go find this chapter. If you can't find the book anywhere, go buy it from Amazon. If you can't find it at Amazon, send me, and I may be able to point you to some copies that I know exist on the web. This last chapter is a fascinating chapter. She's quoting people that most of us have never heard of anymore. But they knew what complex problems were back in the 50s. They were writing about complex problems. They were funding research into complex problems. All the things they were learning are things we can use today. And this is a really nice little touchstone paper, because you can pull it out and say to yourself, it's 50 years later. The world hasn't gotten that much harder to work with. They already had the hard time. They already knew it was hard. And now it's just as hard. And there's actually some little bits of nuggets in here where you could say, well, God, that's a great way to think about the problem. I never thought of talking about the problem this way. Let me recover this language. Let me put it up on my slide next week when the boss says to me, how are we going to address the new changing market? And you can say, well, Jane Jacobs back in the 60s is quoting Warren Weaver from the 50s. They had an idea. It's not horribly hard. And the main thing is, don't get depressed by it. And with that, I'll end my time up here. One last thing, I'd like to give everyone who set this event up another round of applause again. And with that, have a great weekend.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much.